I wanted to pursue a medical career. So I wanted to be a doctor. And then very short from thinking about that, I was like, well, this is really not for me. And so I thought, well, the next obvious step on like taking care of people and like keeping people healthy is, of course, like keeping our environment healthy and like understanding all this earth processes.
In this episode of Voices from the Field, we meet up with one of NCAT's newest sustainable agriculture specialists, Luz Ballesteros Gonzalez. In her conversation with her colleague, Robert Maggiani, in the NCAT Southwestern Regional Office in San Antonio, Texas, Luz talks about how she decided on a career in sustainable agriculture. After initially setting out to study medicine, her interests in chemistry and environmental sciences led her to see the connections between health and food, agriculture, and community. Environmental scientists, Luz says, are the doctors of the earth. Let's listen.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Robert Maggiani. I am a sustainable ag specialist with the National Center of Appropriate Technology. I'm in the Texas office, which is part of our Southwestern Regional Office. Here today to give you all a little bit of introduction into one of our new employees. Luz Ballesteros has joined the organization about a couple of weeks ago. We're certainly glad to have her here, and we're going to take an opportunity this afternoon to learn a little bit more about her and how she decided to pick NCAT and all the great things we're hoping to hear that she wants to do with NCAT. So Luz, welcome to the broadcast. And let me just start with the first question. I'm curious, where were you born and raised, Luz?
Yeah, Robert, thank you for the introduction and the warm welcoming. So actually, I was born in Mexico City, and I moved to the Rio Grande Valley, Texas, when I was around 12 years old. And then 5 years later, I moved to Northwest Arkansas, and I lived in Arkansas for about 2 years. And then I ultimately decided to come back to the Valley for college, and I was a little tired of the cold and missing the heat. So I guess you could say I'm from here and I'm from there and I'm a little bit from everywhere.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I'm curious also, just continuing with a discussion of family a little bit. I'm just curious, does your family have any direct connections to agriculture? Do you have any childhood memories of going to a ranch for that your uncle and aunt had or your grandpa had, or any? So what's your ag connections from your family?
Yeah, so curiously, I have no direct family connections like in agriculture. In fact, I think when I was little, my mom decided to take out the grass and put some concrete in because she didn't want to deal with it. So very like not a lot of like family memories in that. My family has always been in the like business sector, private industry driven. So it wasn't until I discovered like my like passion for agriculture until I came back to the Valley and I came back to college and I started to make connections about like my life, health, agriculture, food, community. And one thing that drove me to agriculture was like my love for food and my love for eating. I think I want to say I'm a very good cook. And so I really like to cook. And then one day I sat down and I was like thinking, like, I wonder where like all of these ingredients that I'm cooking with are coming from. And I kind of like dove into it and it took me to agriculture. And then I met Dr. Alexis Rosales at UTRGV and all of his like grad students. And I truly like fell in love with it when I saw how like the fields were transforming from season to season and like the hard work the farmers, ranchers, growers, like everyone puts into it. And I think just out of deep admiration and like love for change, I got into agriculture.
Okay, well, let's just follow that line of thought. So then how did, as all that was happening and you were trying to decide your career, I guess, your academic selection, what made you pick environmental science then as a major?
Yeah, so I've always been between the line of like science and art. And I mean, I chose science because it's its own art. And so at the beginning, I wanted to pursue a medical career. So I wanted to be a doctor. And then very short from thinking about that, I was like, well, this is really not for me. And so I thought, well, the next obvious step on like taking care of people and like keeping people healthy is of course like keeping our environment healthy and like understanding all this earth processes. And so that took me to environmental science. And then in my work as an environmental scientist and the chemistry of it all, I came into the agricultural world and I saw a lot of good and then also a lot of bad. And just got very curious about it. And so that's why I decided to further my knowledge with a master's degree on sustainable agriculture and environmental sciences, and then focus on soil health, soil nutrients, and everything relating to keeping people healthy, keeping animals healthy, keeping the environment healthy. And so I would like to think that environmental scientists are kind of like the doctors of the earth. So that's how I came to it.
Okay, well, speaking a little bit more about your work there at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, I noticed that you worked on a soil dynamics project. Can you give us a little bit of history and what you really thought was interesting about that project?
Yeah, of course. So as part of my master's degree at UTRGV, so at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, I was asked to work on the NRCS Dynamic Soils Property Project. And then I kind of took on the role as the chemist on the project. And I specifically focus on like soil carbon and soil nitrogen. And I just found it very, very interesting, especially with all this hype about potentially capturing carbon on agricultural soils. I thought it was a good project and it would give me a chance to analyze the impacts that management has on those two elements. And so for this project, I particularly focus on how different tillage regimes have an effect on nitrogen and soil carbon, kind of in a very like short amount of time. And then also kind of see how those interactions work with like a very hot climate, so a subtropical climate, and of course like the clay soils and the sandy soils from the valley. So that's what brought me to that project and what I'm currently wrapping up. And then of course collaborating and working with my colleagues at UTRGV to not only look at the carbon and the nitrogen, but also look at the biology and the physics of it and how it all works together in a cycle instead of just looking at a one-dimensional picture, have it all be 3D.
So as it relates to nitrogen, what factors or what indicators in the soil were you actually trying to measure?
We measure total nitrogen using the CN analyzer, and we also measure ACE protein, so that's linked to the available organic nitrogen. So those were the two measurements that we're looking at, right? And then the total nitrogen having both the inorganic and organic, and then just having it see how it responds to tillage. And then of course we have other metrics. We have things such as the phospholipid fatty acids, so PLFA, seeing how that the positive, negative bacteria, the fungi, just kind of seeing if there's like any correlation between that biological activity and the organic nitrogen.
And has that project wrapped up? Has it written its final project report yet?
Not yet. So we're wrapping it up. And the reason being is because we want our lab data to be as accurate as it could possibly be. So one of the things that this project is also giving the university, I think, an opportunity is to see the capacity that they have on conducting kind of this like soil analysis and soil tests as accurately as possible. So it hasn't wrapped up yet. We're looking at the data and deciding if it's good enough or if it needs to be done all over again.
NCAT Soil for Water connects you with farmers, ranchers, and land managers who are discovering practical ways to catch and hold more water in their soils. Find their stories of success, practical tips for soil health, and more at soilforwater.org.
Okay, well, I know you've been there at UTRGV for 3 or 4 years, I guess now, and part of what has developed there over that time period is that a group of students, again through Dr. Rosales' work, have come together to form a student farm. I think it's called the Hub of Prosperity Farm. I'm curious if you could give us a little bit of history of your participation in that farm and what you think it really adds to the whole value of students like yourself going through the UTRGV system there.
I cannot take credit for any work about the Global Prosperity. Everything is Stephanie Casper and Dr. Alexis Rosales. And I think they've achieved everything that they set their mind to, and with the purpose of making urban agriculture more tangible for people in the valley, and then also creating this sense of community and this sense of like knowledge of where your food is coming from. And I think we are all learning from them, not even like not only students from the university, but also people from the community and people in the church. So they're very much making agriculture tangible for people that don't have a background on it. And so I want to say that my work is a volunteer and learning from them. And so, yeah, I think they're doing a great job. And I think it's a good way of getting hands-on experience and like teaching students, like not from books, but from the field.
And so if I'm not mistaken, I think the farm is what, about 5 acres, and you rent it from a church there that's close to the university, correct?
Yeah. So I think it is 5 acres, and they do rent it from I forgot the name of the church, but this Methodist church, and it started just like as an abandoned terrain. And if you Google it and if you look at it, it was like truly transformed, and they have like multiple partners, and they also have some ongoing pollinator research going on. So very cool space, and a good
And so
addition.
you also actually have a farmer's market set up there, right? So part of the education that's going on there for the students is how do you make agriculture really work as a business, right?
Yeah, they do have a farmers market every Saturday morning, and they also have volunteer hours for like anyone that wants to come, not just only students. I think it's just showing the community like all the aspects of it. So like the business side of it, the work side of it, the planning side of it. So very cool space.
Yeah. All right. So kind of changing the perspective a little bit. I know you said you were a volunteer at that farm, and so you've also graduated, got your bachelor's degree, and you actually started a career at an institution called the Texas Water Development Board, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what you did there at the Texas Water Development Board?
I like truly love my work at the Texas Water Development Board, and my work was doing community outreach and technical assistance for communities participating on the National Flood Insurance Program. So that was more about disaster mitigation planning and everything that has to do with the National Flood Insurance Program. So also conducting soft audits. So I found my work very fulfilling, and I definitely learned a lot, and learned how communities like deal with disaster mitigation planning. And then I also kind of like saw everything else that TWDB is doing, and they're undergoing projects not only on water conservation, but also on flood mitigation, and kind of connecting the water cycle again, right? So from drought to flood, from conservation to flood. So that was my work with TWDB. And I think I encourage anyone who lives in Texas to look at their website and see the work that they're doing, because I think it's a very good job.
I'm curious, within the agency there, not only with the specific project you work for, but is there a recognition of the importance of agriculture as it relates to water conservation and water use in Texas within that agency?
Yeah, so they do have a agricultural conservation team, and they do provide, I believe, grants or loans for people that are, I guess, like have like water conservation projects, like irrigation projects. So there is a growing interest on like how we can save water and help farmers like help farmers save water. So they do have that, and people can go check it in under their conservation page.
Okay. All right. So you worked there for a little bit, and now you've left the Water Development Board and you've come over to NCAT. So I'm curious, what, as you decided to make that transition, in your mind, what are the project areas within NCAT that you really hope to be able to work on and have some impact on?
I kind of decided to work for NCAT because of course, like my master's degree work and my interest in the environment and agriculture. So I'm very interested in working and continuing working on NCAT's like soil for water. And then as well as maybe learn a little bit more about the agri-solar and how there can be an intersection between renewable energy and agriculture, and then how that can connect to the soil for water, because ultimately at the end of the day, everything really connects, right? And I think I'm also very interested in working on the technical assistance and community outreach and the communication side of things, right? Because I think NCAT is doing some amazing things, and I think people need to know that we're here and all the work that we're doing.
Well, that's interesting you said that. I really have only one more question for you, and it relates kind of to just what you said about NCAT. The work that NCAT's doing is very important, and the importance of, I guess, sharing the gospel, so to speak. So I'm curious, just on a personal level, when you now meet with your friends and everybody and you say, hey, I just got this new job at NCAT, how do you explain that to them, to people who have no real connection to agriculture and really don't know much about agriculture? How do you really tell them what you did and why you did it?
I think this is a hard one, especially because my family's not in agriculture and because a lot of my family still lives in Mexico. So it's kind of like hard to explain that I work for a nonprofit, but the way I explain it is like I work for a nonprofit that provides assistance, guidance, and connects multiple players, so like state agencies and other nonprofits in this path to sustainable agriculture and outreach. And I think when I say connects and communicates, because they're all very like business people, they're like, okay, I understand, like I get what you guys are doing. So that's the way I explain it.
Okay, well, thank you, Luz. We sure appreciate it, and we appreciate all of y'all listening to Luz's and our discussion here today. As I mentioned earlier, Luz has just joined NCAT. We're real glad to have her on our team and expect a lot of good things out of her. And so we will sign off now, and thanks for listening to our podcast.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.incat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.